Hi, and welcome to the video, using OpenCV in Python. Okay, so you saw how to launch your Anaconda Navigator in the previous video. So remember, every time you want to go into your code, you can bring up Anaconda Navigator. Remember, you want to switch to your CV library, and that changes here. If you didn't install a different library using Anaconda, it'll be in your base directory, so don't worry, okay? So now, the program we're going to launch our code in is the Jupyter Notebook. So press launch here, and that brings up your IPython notebooks in your web browser. So here we go. It loads perfectly right here. Just takes a couple seconds, and your code will be installed, will be placed in this directory here. So if you downloaded the code from GitHub, well, you would want to put your zip file, your extracted code, in your base directory. I'm talking about your users directory in Windows. So every Windows user has a default Windows directory, which will usually be C drive users / your name. So I'll put a little text thing here so you can see what it looks like, for example. And when you're using WinZip to extract your files, I want you to extract it into that directory. That's because IPython or Jupyter Notebooks, default directory they load up in is your user directory. So it's going to be easy for you to find the code here. So now let's just click on the directory with the code. And you will see all the sections of your course, section 1, 2, 3, all the way to 6, and a little install guide text file in case you wanted to see how to install and set up everything, which you would have already done, but you can always go back to this file to check and see how to do it again. So the course is organized into 6 sections, and all the code is going to be in each section. Now, because I recorded this course with all the code initially in one big directory, I'm showing you guys how it's set up here because it's the first video, but in all the videos in the future, it is in the videos itself. It's going to be in one directory. So what's going to happen is that the numbering of the course, every code item is numbered here. These numbers remain consistent in all video. Or when I say just go to the code labeled number 12, number 12 may very well be in section 4, but it will be easy to find, and you should have no trouble finding the code in this course because everything is well named and well labeled. So now let's start with section 1 in our introductory code, where we're getting started using OpenCV. So the first section we're going to do is section 1 called Getting Started with OpenCV. So let's launch this IPython notebook, and to launch it, just click on it and it pops up in a new window here. And as you can see, you have all your code in this IPython notebook. So let me just explain quickly the structure of this notebook. In these IPython notebooks, we have what we call cell blocks here. And cell blocks are good because they allow us to run small segments of code here. And we can print, we can do many things. We can run entire program in these blocks if you so wish. However, why it's great for teaching is that we can run small pieces of code so we can illustrate concepts as we step through them. So we're going to run through a few beginning concepts here of OpenCV. This is all very easy code, and luckily everything here is well commented and well explained. So if you want to do this on your own without watching the video, or even after watching the video just to get more familiar with what's going on, you're free to do so. So now in the first block, what we're going to do, we're going to import OpenCV, and OpenCV in Python is labeled as the module CV2. So everything that's CV2 is really OpenCV. Now, the reason for the 2 is basically, and when OpenCV2 was launched, the OpenCV guys renamed the entire packages as CV2 by default. If for whatever reason you wanted to use CV, you can just import CV as CV and use it as that such. But I don't want to confuse you guys, so that's probably just erase that knowledge from your memory right now because it's pretty much irrelevant. So what we're going to do, we're just going to run this first block of code. So how did I do that? Press Control and Enter together. So you can run that here and it runs like that. You can also press Shift and Enter, also runs. And lastly, you can do Alt Enter as well to run a code block, and what it does, it runs this block and creates a brand new one under it. So I often alternate between all running code blocks by using Alt Enter if I want additional code block after, or Shift and Enter and Control Enter do the exact same thing. So we can erase these code blocks by just cutting it here and deleting it. So if you just want to clean up your notebooks here, you can just quickly remove them here. But remember, once you delete a block here, it sort of disappears forever. There's no undo for deleting a code block here, at least not yet, to my knowledge. So just be careful when you're doing that. So now let's move on to finding out what version of OpenCV you're using. So we run this code block here and we see it prints out using the print statement in Python, prints the CV2 version right here. So this is the latest version of OpenCV as of April 2020. So I'm hoping you guys would have this version at least, or even a newer version in future. Now, OpenCV 4.x, X meaning any future versions of OpenCV or even previous versions like 4.1 or 4.0, they all should be compatible with all the same code. If there's anything that's incompatible, you can contact me and I'll try to update the code to fix the issue. So now let's import NumPy. So what we're going to use NumPy for is that images are stored as NumPy arrays. So effectively, every time we're loading an image from OpenCV, it's a NumPy array. So if we're doing any future operations on that image that does not involve using OpenCV, you're going to want to use import NumPy and use it. So when we say import NumPy as NP, every time we call something with a function, say an np.something, we're using NumPy. Now again, this may be a little bit too much knowledge. If you're an absolute beginner, you can just sort of ignore this for now, just knowing that we're going to use it sometimes in the course, sometimes not. It's not always necessary, but when you do some sort of operations on the images, which you'll see in future video, just remember you can import NumPy and use it as such. So now let's get started finally with using OpenCV for something pretty cool. So what we're going to do, we're going to import CV. Now you don't always need to do this in every cell block. Once you import something in one cell block, it remains imported. You can use it in every cell of this notebook. So that's pretty cool. So what we're going to do, we're going to read an image here. So by reading an image, we just point this function cv2.imread to load this image here, this input image, this test image we're going to use, and store that a variable called image here. And then we're going to use the cv2.imshow function. That's a function that displays the image on our screen. So we just give window name this here, loading a first image, and we tell it which image we want to load here. So this function takes two parameters. One is a name, one is the image variable we want to load. And then cv2 wait key, we call this function because otherwise if we don't, window just stays on top and we can't really do anything with it. So it has to wait for a key to be pressed so we can move on to the next step of our program. And fortunately, the next step of our program is to destroy that window. So let's take a look and see how this runs. There we go. So that's our test image here. This image is in your base directory here. You can find this images here, input. That's the directory I was pointing it to. And let's get back our image. So as I said, cv2k is waiting for some command because right now it pauses the program at this point. It wants you to do something with the image. So what we're going to do is going to hit any key and the window will close. So consider this like a pause key here that is waiting for input. So when you load an image and you want it displayed for a second, we can do it here. So now let's do something else. And that something else is actually exactly the exact same thing as we did before, but with all the extraneous comments here. Just going to run this simple program here. There we go. So notice we have a 0 here. We didn't have a 0 before. The 0 acts like the same as leaving it as blank. However, sometimes in some operating systems like macOS and Linux, you do need to have an input 0 here, or 1 sometimes, just to make it work correctly. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about why it works, if it doesn't work for you, because what happens sometimes on macOS, if you don't have the 0 here, everything just freezes and pauses here, and you can't do anything to progress to the destroy Windows command, which is the last command in our cell. So now let's see what we're going to use NumPy for. So we're going on to this cell here. So we're importing NumPy as NP, as I said before, which we already did before. And what we're going to do, we're just going to print the shape of the image. So when I say shape of the image, tell me what you think this is. I know you can't actually tell me, but think about it. What do you think this is? So you saw the image before. This is the image here. It looks fairly nice, nicely detailed. Well, in case you haven't figured it out, this is the resolution of the image. As in, when I say resolution, I mean height, width, and what's this tree about? This tree is actually the color depth. Remember, images are comprised of different color spaces. So remember we have RGB color space here. That's what this is. This is the red, green, and blue color combinations. Every pixel, we have a color combination for red, green, and blue. So that's why shape is like this here. Three-dimensional array. And these are the quantities of the dimensions in this array. So now if you want to just see it in more detail here, I just have these print statements here to explain it. And what we're doing here, we're using the shape thing here, the shape function. I shouldn't call it a thing, it's actually a function. What it does here, remember this returns a tuple. Consider a tuple to be an array here, in case you don't know the Pythonic definitions of a tuple and an array. But either way, we can actually get the first value here, which is 597, by addressing the first value in this array. The second value would be addressed by index 1, and the third value by index 2. So you can see these are the pixels here for the height, the width, and the depth, or the color components. So you can see it's nicely displayed here. So it's a good little function just to get familiar with. Now, what about saving images? Suppose we have done some fancy cool OpenCV operations on our image and we want to save it. Well, we can use this simple function called cv2.imwrite, and you can just give it the name, and we can actually use many different names here. So you can use JPEG, PNG, BMP, TIF, I believe, or FF actually. There's many others you can are supported by OpenCV's imwrite function. And image was a variable you want to save. So remember, we loaded this image here as from our input, we pointed it to the directory and we loaded it and we call it image here. That's our variable. Well, scroll back down. This is what we're going to do. We're going to save the variable image as output JPEG. So let's do this here. And it returns true. True meaning it ran successfully. Now also do it and change the image file format to PNG, which is portable network graphics, and does it there. So now you should see these two files here. These two output files are correctly saved here. And you can see the difference in sizes. PNG is actually much bigger. It's 4 times bigger at 1.3 megs, whereas the JPEG, which is compressed, which is at 300K. So that's it for this video. You got a quick introduction to OpenCV. There's some basics with loading OpenCV, how to load images, how to use NumPy, how to get the image dimensions, and how to save images here. So to quickly summarize what you've learned in the video, you've learned how to import OpenCV in Python, what NumPy and use it when needed, how to view the image dimensions, which we did use NumPy's shape function to determine, how to open images, you saw using cv2.imread, how to view images with cv2.imshow, how to save images with cv2. Do you remember? It's cv2.imwrite. So you learned how to use these basic functions in OpenCV. So now let's move on to the next video, where we get a closer and deeper understanding of color spaces and then how to apply grayscaling, which is a different color space that you'll see shortly. So now let's move on to the next video.